Hey guys, welcome back to the MTT Principles series. This is Dang16. We're going to continue on with some more early game today. Last week we got started with the real meat and potatoes of this series, quite a few concepts. Went over quite a few hand history examples as well. This week it's going to be more of the same. Today we're going to focus quite a bit on odds and drawing hands. I got quite a bit of requests for that from some of the novice and newer players to MTTs. So hopefully what I cover today, we'll get through all that and answer all those questions. Also, we're going to take a look at some hands where we make some folds early in the tournament with some bigger hands. Discuss why, what type of reads allow you to make these type of folds, and also just discuss when it might be a good idea to just to not be stubborn and just move on in the tournament. You know, going back to the fact that you just always want to survive in MTTs. A big fold early in the tournament might be bigger in the long run than a big call. So we'll discuss that. Also, on the other hand, maximizing value when we do get those really big hands. We're going to show some examples of that today. Discuss the differences between some in position, out of position, deeper versus shallower stacks, wet versus dry boards, these big hands, and when you're trying to maximize value, always bring for good discussion. Lastly, a couple more hands where we manufacture our own chips. A couple hands here we're going to take a look at, two of which were pertaining to questions I got via PM and just more building on stuff we learned last week, as well as a couple more creative situations that again build on stuff that we've already talked about. So yeah, more with the early game. I want to give you guys the opportunity to, make sure you're sending PMs or writing in the thread if there's anything specific that, I may have left out or that you think would make for a good series or a good short. A lot of these concepts could, potentially be a great 15-minute video. So yeah, please let me know. So let's get started. Alright guys, so let's get started with the drawing part of episode 3. I got a lot of requests on PM and the threads to do a little bit more with the drawing part of the early game. So what we're going to do today is work with PokerStove. For all you novice guys that are brand new, you're probably the ones that wanted more information on draws and what hands have what sort of equity versus other hands. You guys are probably the ones that need to download PokerStove and tinker with it. Use it. Get to know what type of hands have what equity versus others. What does a flush have versus set? What does a flush and or flush draw and overcards have, versus one pair? Get to know it and use it. Also, we're going to use it to confirm the rule of 4 and 2. I'm going to show you guys how to use your outs and some quick multiplication to calculate your equity in game. In a lot of course, you're in a lot of situations, maybe when we're multi-tabling or in a tough spot, we're not going to be able to pull up PokerStove and get the exact numbers. So this is a way to calculate it in game. It's going to be a way to calculate it in game. All right, first off, let's do a quick tutorial here and do a couple examples so you get to see the numbers, and also so you'll know how to use this program when you go download it. Let's assume that we have like a moderate flush draw, 8-9 of diamonds here, versus, okay, let's assume that a flop came out of queen of diamonds, 6 diamonds, 2 of spades. So you want to know how often this hand gets here, and we're just going to assume a range for our opponent. So yeah, we've got this moderate flush draw. We have 9 outs here. Let's assume that our opponent has offsuited king, queen. In this situation, we have about 40% equity. If we expect to see the turn in the, or if we are going to see the turn in the river, we expect to win this pot roughly 40% of the time, 2 out of 5. Let's pretend that we go to the turn and see a bad turn card that brings us no extra outs. It's roughly gonna cut us in half. So, quick wrap up of this hand. Moderate flush draw versus top pair has roughly 40% equity. Let's do a different example. Let's do a humongous draw. Let's do the biggest draw possible. Oops. New one. Jack 10, or I'm sorry. Jack 10 of diamonds. Let's assume the board comes out. We have an open-ended flush draw, and the board is paired. So we're going to make this the biggest draw possible versus a made hand. So we're going to give him 2s, and evaluate, and so you can see that humongous draw here is a 70% favorite. So just a couple quick examples of how to use PokerStove. Also works multi-way. Let's, you're curious about, talk about how aces is a huge favorite versus an under pair, 80-20. But you also might be curious as to what kind of equity it has versus a couple other hands. Let's add 6-7 of hearts there and another pair, pocket 3s. Now you can see that pocket aces loses equity and other hands gain equity in those multi-way pots. So there is a quick example of how to use PokerStove. Now also I want to use it quickly to help you guys determine your equity in game, and that's going to be the rule of 2 and 4, or of 4 and 2. Let's do another quick example, something that might come up quite a bit. Let's say you have the 8-9 of diamonds again. Well, let's just say we flopped a rainbow straight draw. And let's just go the 6, the 7, and that king. So, here, this isn't the exact same as the flush draw. Now we have 8 outs with the open-ender rather than the 9 flush outs. And we're going to give our opponent the king-queen off again. So, let's say that that's the type of hand that we're ranging our opponent on. And we want to know what kind of equity that we do have. This might help us determine whether to make a call on the flop, or maybe to fold on the flop, or maybe even to shove it in. So, using the rule of 4 and 2, we're going to take our outs, which is 8 in this situation, and multiply it by 4. That comes to 32. Do a quick evaluate. Comes up 34%, so it's right there. Just a bit off of our calculation, but it's all right. This is the type of thing that you can use in game to determine your equity quickly and help you make decision. So now that's the 4 in the rule of 4 and 2. Now let's discuss the 2. Let's assume that we get to the turn and we hit another bad turn card, giving us no more draw. So we still have only 8 outs. Well, now we should expect equity of about 16 on the turn. And, as you can see, it's 18. So, bottom line, what I want you guys to get out of this poker stove discussion and the drawing discussion is, hands have many different types of equity. A flush draw on a queen high board with undercards has a lot different equity than, let's say, a flush draw that also has overcards and straight equity, or just more outs. So get comfortable with counting your exact outs. Get comfortable at doing it quickly, and also get comfortable with these numbers. Use Poker Stove. Bang out a bunch of these until you have a good conceptual understanding of it, and also use that rule of 4 and 2 in game. When, let's say that you have a situation with a multi-way board where it went raise in front of you on an ace-high board where you know that you're likely behind. Knowing the percentages of when you do get there might allow you, to make a good fold or a good call based on the odds that are put in front of you. So, yeah, next up, let's talk about pot odds versus implied odds. All right, pot odds and implied odds. Both are important concepts that come into play at all stages of MTTs, but having got a lot of interest for material in the early game, we're going to discuss quite a bit of it here. Pot odds. What is in the pot right now? It's essentially how you determine, whether the hand that you have or the draw that you have, whether or not we're getting the right price to continue on with the hand, or maybe peel off another turn or turn and river. Quick little hypothetical situation. Let's assume that we have a 3-way hand. Pot is 300 pre-flop. On the flop, we have position, and the two guys in front of you. One bets 150, and the other calls 150. So that 300, along with the 300 that was in the pot pre-flop, we are now getting 4-1 price or pot odds because it costs us 150 into this pot of 600. Essentially, all pot odds do early in the tournament is determining whether or not you are getting the right price for your draw. It's assuming no further action in the hand, and it's, not taking anything else into account at all. It's just what is in the pot right now and what is your price. We will go over a hand. We'll do a hypothetical situation or two in Poker Stove here in a minute, and hopefully that will, continue to help you guys have a better understanding of what pot odds are and how you use them early in the tournament, because I think people kind of use it incorrectly or as an incorrect justification. Another concept that's, implied odds is just as important, if not more, early. Determining whether or not to set mine pre-flop all comes down to implied odds. What we could potentially win later on, what's the absolute max if we do flop our set, or if we, call a raise with 4-7 suited in a 7-way pot, on the button. We'll Poker Stove a couple different situations here to discuss, common situations that come up early. Maybe a quick hand here or there, both involving pot odds or implied odds. So yeah, let's go to Poker Stove real quick. All right, so now we're back up in PokerStove, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give an example of a situation that might come up, and also where two different bet sizes, from the opponents might change our, or will change our course of action if we're playing well. And also, this meshes both implied odds and pot odds, and hopefully give you a better understanding. So let's assume that we're in the very first hand of an MTT. So we're playing at the 1530 level with 3,000 starting stacks. And we have 8-9 of diamonds as shown up here on the PokerStove on the button. We're going to assume there's an early position raised to 90. A couple call or a call by another player, a call by us on the button, and then both the small blind and the big blind call. So there's 450 chips in pre-flop in a multi-way pot. So now let's have that situation again where we flopped a flush draw, and let's also put an over card out there. Let's put the ace. Something says more than likely someone else does have a piece. So now let's talk about two different scenarios. Let's say that the early position, the original raiser, bets 150 here, and it is called by another player, and now it's up to us to act. So now we're looking at a pot of 750, and it's 150 for us to call. So we're getting 5-1 at this point, but also keep in mind we also have some pretty good implied odds, as we're still with that 3,000 starting stack. No player has more than 240 chips in the middle at this point. So, we still have the implied odds of an extra 2,700-ish from the players with their money in the pot, or maybe the small blind or the big blind will get involved as well and improve our pot and implied odds. Now let's pretend that we have the same board, and hypothetically the under the gun, the original raiser bets 450 here into the pre-flop pot of 450, and is called by another player before it is our turn to act. Now we're looking at a pot of 3-1, and our implied odds are significantly less, as the two players who are involved already have put in a much bigger chunk of their stack. So, in these two different situations, you're talking about a flush draw that could have the same sort of equity, but the pot odds and implied odds of those to act in front of us kind of dictates what we can or can't do. Let's give a potential range for the other players. Let's assume that, let's go with the smaller bet size. So let's say we can't necessarily narrow their hand down. We might be able to give them a bigger range. Let's say that maybe we're up against a top pair and a good kicker, and then maybe some sort of other weird draw. Let's say maybe a guy got involved with the 4 or 5 of spades in a pot like this and decided to peel off. Well, oh, sorry. Let me pause and restart. All right, there we go. So, in this situation where let's say I put in this assumed ranges of, maybe a top pair and some other sort of draw, just a gutter. If we're going to see both the turn and the river, we have big equity in this hand, roughly 40%. So, if we're talking about getting that 5-1 plus further implied odds, in the situation with the guy bets 150, we're definitely gonna peel one off, at least see the turn, and maybe reevaluate from there. Let's assume with the other situation that maybe because someone bet full pot and it was called, maybe we feel like we're up against a tighter range. Maybe include maybe a set is quite a bit more likely. In a situation where, we think that a set might be out there and maybe we have quite a bit less equity and we're also getting far worse pot odds, but also less implied odds. So, odds and drawing and implied odds and there's a million different examples, and I really, really suggest to you guys that are new to MTTs or having trouble with those situations, use PokerStove. Input a bunch of these different scenarios, and also, consider different bet sizes. Sometimes, especially when you're talking about early in tournaments and deep stacks, some people might be calling off too lightly with draws when not getting a good price, or maybe you're missing situations where there is good equity to get involved. One other situation I wanted to take a look at real quick. We're not going to fully discuss how a hand could play out, but again, talk about the implied odds. Let's put some big hands out here. Let's pretend that maybe a big 7-way type of pot happened pre-flop, where there's all sorts of hands and all sorts of pairs, a couple suited connectors. Let's even maybe like a king jack off. Let's give one more random, like twos. And then let's maybe assume we're here on the button with a real drawy type of hand. Say let's the 5-8 of hearts. Evaluate. Just looking at the hand pre-flop. This is just the odds if it went in pre. In this 7-way pot, a hand like 8-5 of hearts has 9%. Now, let's say this is one of those situations where went raise, call, 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 call. We're all very deep stack. This is a situation where we can get it in, or we can flick in a call with the 8-5 of hearts and see a flop and hope to flop big, because our hand has equity and humongous implied odds, and also in position, being the last of act and having all that information. If we don't flop a monster hand here, we can get away cheap. So I hope for you guys that had PM'd me and asked about further odds and drawing discussion and pot odds, implied odds, I hope this helped. And once again, reiterate, use this program, get to know it. It can be very, very helpful. All right, guys. Next thing I want to talk about, I want to show you a couple what I would call big folds early in the tournament, big hands that I elected to let go. Talk about why the reads that I used, and I think these will be a kind of a good segue into a couple hands where we do maximize value. A lot of the time, I think folding is something that isn't given enough credit to in MTTs, and also something that I think I've gotten away from sometimes as well. It's really good to be aggressive and great to accumulate chips, but if there are spots where we're spewing early in tournaments or taking ourselves out of tournaments earlier than we should be, that's not a good thing and something to consider. So let's take a look at two spots where I folded big hands early in the tournament and talk about why. So here's ace queen suited folded to me here in the cutoff. I raise it up and get 3-bet by the small blind. You know, this automatically throws up red flags. This is you know, a player that I had is pretty tight over the few hands that we had. But I also thought that we were playing deep enough. I was getting over 10-1 implied. You know, we just went over the implied odds. 185 is about 7% of, you know, the 2,600 he had to start the hand. So that's where that came from. So I felt that with the implied odds and the position, we were deep enough to see a flop and go from there. You know, at first glance here, it's a good flop. You know, there's some things that I am afraid of course. And the guy bet just about full pot here. I don't remember if there was an exact pot that came up at this point in the tournament that is the reason he had lost some chips, but based on the fact that I had him is pretty tight, I elected to just fold it here and move on. I might be able to shove here and take the pot down, or call and reevaluate, or raise with the intent to get it in. There's a couple different things. I just didn't think that I was going to ever dominate anything, and I thought I was going to get called quite a bit considering the player. Another reason that I held on to this hand actually is he showed us 2 kings at the end of the hand. This was pretty. It was early in the tournament, and you know, I think this was a $24 tournament, and I just didn't think I was ever going to get it in best, and even the hands that I was beating might have big equity versus me. You know, maybe some sort of heart draw, like ace king of hearts or ace jack of hearts. So I elected to just kind of manage the tournament, wait for better spots later on down the road. We're still at the 10-20 level, way over 100 big blinds. Yeah, luckily he showed us the kings there, and I felt better about myself. But just kind of a little discussion as to why I folded that spot. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're at the 5,100 level, still early game because we're deep. And I pound the limper, raise about 340, just about 3.5 times, and get 3-bet by an aggressive player who I know pretty well, actually very well. And it got back to me. And this was a situation where, you know, I could consider 4-betting pre-flop. Also could consider folding. I thought we were deep enough to peel one and reevaluate here on the flop. I will treat jacks definitely a little bit different early in the tournament, more like I would 7s, 8s, or 9s later. I am looking to set mine, but there's obviously a lot of situations where, you know, our we might have an overpair to the flop that we're going to be willing to go with. So I call here. That's rare. That's really rare for me. Keep that in mind. This is a situation where I knew the player and thought, you know, I might be able to outplay him post flop. You know, this is, you know, a nasty board where I just wasn't excited to see it. Even if he had 3-bet us with something like a small pair of suited connector, there's a lot of opportunity for us to be way behind. And I think this is a spot where a lot of our new players and novice players might get caught up in the fact that they just have an overpair. Here's a spot where we need to think about, the situation. We have a huge stack at the 5100 level. We have almost a full 80 blinds, and I just don't think we show up, or I don't think a hand shows up here by Drummer Boy that has, a lot of equity for us. That being said, I just check folded. He put out a nice big bet. Looked like he's definitely protecting some sort of hand. Good bluff or good aggression if he doesn't have it. But yeah, just one of those spots where we've got a lot of chips. I don't feel good about the situation. Don't get caught up post flop just because you have an overpair. Remember that he was aggressive pre-flop. He also, knows how I play a little bit because we have some history, and we're also a couple hands into the tournament. This isn't. We might have some other reads or things getting going or involved in it. So, out of the next up, we're going to take a look at some hands where we our goal is to maximize some value. Well, don't forget that there are situations where we can minimize our losses as well, and they may be just as important to the big call or the big hand later on. Also, we don't want to be taking ourselves out of the tournament early or really, knocking down our chances in the first level. That last ace-queen hand was a great example, and I think this jacks was as well. For some people, these folds are pretty easy, but for a lot of the novice guys that are brand new, think about the situation, think about all the action, and hopefully we'll be able to make a good decision with these sort of top pair, top kicker, or marginal overpair hands early in the tournament. All right, so next up, let's take a look at some more hands where we try to maximize our value and build the pot early, or let the player build it for us. So let's take a look. All right, so after taking a look at a couple hands where we folded some relatively big hands early in the tournament, now we're going to take a look at some hands where we flopped even bigger hands and we're looking to maximize value. The hands that are quite a bit more fun to play, of course. Also, they bring up some good discussion. For example, here we're going to take a look at how I played a flop set in position versus an aggressive player. This hand also has some good discussion as well due to how deep we were. I believe this was in the F-Tops main event. It was in one of the F-Tops. So it was a big buy-in, but there were a lot of satellite players. And yeah, just a little bit of a different dynamic that's good discussion for the learning. Because I may have done it different if we were more shallow. So let's get started here. Deep, open pocket nines in early position and get flatted by an aggressive player in the big blind who's already won quite a few chips considering where we are in the tournament. Again, an aggressive player, he leads out to me. It leads into me. Couple of things here. I think it could be with quite a few hands. It could be with an ace, it could easily be an ace, could be some sort of two pair, of course, or a big draw. The fact that we were as deep as we were, I elected to just call here. There was a couple reasons. I think it was too early for this player to really go crazy with just a small draw, and I also think that he might have folded some aces. So I was calling, with position, hoping to improve my hand as well, but also try to milk out a little bit of value. So I just, being as deep as we were, I didn't think he was going to get an ace in right away, or a bad flush draw. So it's kind of just using my position and go from there. And that's where I hit a really good card here to fill up the full house. Now I am my full goal is to get as much value out of him as possible, you know, and use my position. He bets 580 into me here. You know, at this point, I assume he's got a piece of it. But if he doesn't, he has a draw that, you know, isn't going to beat me. So I'm hoping he gets there if he does have a draw. So at this point, I'm just using my position by calling here and giving him the opportunity again to bet into me. Something I definitely want you guys to get out of this hand in particular is on the turn, you know, once we've really hit our massive hand, you know, it might happen on the flop as well. Let's say this was an ace-9 deuce rainbow flop. When you have position and a massive hand, let people continue to bet into you. Don't blow them off hands if they're still betting. You know, give them another shot. That's kind of my thinking on the turn. Also, I don't want to raise it up to like 1600 here and get him to fold a draw. But more or less hoping that he fires the river even if he misses or if he, you know, just has a piece. So I call. Great river for me. You know, the hard draw got there as well. And, you know, if he does have an ace, you know, the ace-7 is less likely than an ace-10 or ace-king or ace-jack. So I'm obviously happy with my hand. Ramon, you know, aggressive again, bets 980 into 2240. Looks value-y to me. Doesn't look like the type of hand he would be bluffing. I also know there's a lot of hands that he can fold here. You know, single aces, maybe a smaller flush he could potentially fold. You know, that being said, it's just about getting thin value. You know, I like to make it 25-66, just about, you know, thin raise, just about 2.5 times his bet, and I get called off, or I do get called by, I think it was ace-jack. Yeah, ace-jack off. So, you know, I was using, there's a couple good things to this hand. I use the position to allow him to bet into me 2 more times after I've made, you know, after I flopped a set and, you know, filled up on the turn. Also, you know, I didn't blow him off the hand. Didn't blow him off the hand on the turn. You know, wouldn't be the case. It would be the case if he had something like a flush draw or jack 10. Also, you know, lastly, I want to just discuss the, you know, this is a very wet flop. And, you know, if on this flop, let's say that we were both, let's say I was shorter. You know, let's say Ramon had a big stack of 7,000 and I had 2,400, 2,300, you know, maybe in a buy-in, a smaller buy-in that without as big of a starting stack. You know, I might have been more inclined to raise on the flop in an attempt, you know, to get it in, depending on what type of player it is. You know, also if he had a ton of chips, you know, let's say he did have 13,000 and I only had that 2,000, maybe I would just shove it in over his bet of 3,000 or of 300 because I just know he's not going to fold if he has any piece of this whatsoever. So, you know, differing stack sizes and the fact that this board is wet. Let's say, like, you know, I said, what if it was ace-9 deuce rainbow earlier? You know, if that was the case, I'm going to continue to let him bet into me no matter what happens on the turn. I'm going to continue to use aggression, and also no matter what type of stack I have. If he's going to continue to put sizable bets into me on that board, I'm going to give him multiple opportunities and then attack on the Turner River. Being as deep as we were here, you know, I went for it on the river. So yeah, kind of rambled a bit at the end, but I hope, you know, you guys get something out of that one for maximizing value in position. Alright guys, the next hand I had here for maximizing value, it's another set. This one's actually from a 6-handed tournament. Sorry, I didn't have as many hands on my Hold'em managers I would have liked, so um, had to choose from what I had. So kind of similar strength, but keep in mind you can do this type of lead out with top two pair, disguise bottom two. You can do it with other strength of hands. Just turned out that I had sets to take a look at. So aggressive player raised on the button, and I call. One of those spots where he had been mixing it up quite a bit early already. I thought I felt like I wanted to build a good pot here early and out of position. I also wanted to kind of look scared, like I was making a timid bet in an attempt to take it down here pre or on the flop. And I also, I know aggressive players will float, especially in position. Well, obviously in position, and especially in 5-6 handed tables. So about 105 into 255. Smaller size here. I'm definitely not trying to protect against anything. I'm trying to build a pot and hopefully get more value down the road and set up some bet sizes. So here, I elect to check and give off the weakness, the type of thing I was looking for. If he was floating me, I'm open for a bet here. And I get it. He bets 210 here into 465. So at this point, I want to check raise and hopefully continue to get value. Raised up to 675 here. Want to keep him involved in the pot. Also want to give him a little bit of, trying to give him a sense of fold equity, where maybe I'm making a play here on the turn and he can shove in. Also, maybe he'll continue to think something like King Jack, King Queen, or Ace King, or Aces is good. I just get called here, and an ace on the river. I don't want to blow him off a hand here. If he has like Ace King or two pair or anything that does beat us, it's gonna get in here. But I also want to give him the opportunity to make a call with hands that we beat, of course, and bet 725. And I did get called by King Queen. This was an example of with a huge hand, building a pot early, also using an aggressive player's tendencies against him. I had him tagged. This is actually a fake name. But I had him tagged as a very aggressive player and used it against him. Keep in mind also, this is a very dry board, and we're also talking about five-handed here, so we're definitely not trying to blow anyone off the hand or protect anything. Once in a while, making a bet like that, even versus an aggressive player, his 4 or 5 suited didn't hit anything, and that's fine, and I'm going to get folds once in a while. But in an attempt to really get the most out of your hands, you want to play against the player as much as possible. And if it's an aggressive player, lead out at him. Give him the opportunity to float you, or maybe put out some sort of race here. So yeah, those were two spots with sets on different type of boards. One being wet, one being dry. One playing a little more deep stacked than the other, but I think we hit just about everything I wanted to there. If you have more questions on these type of hands, or if you want more stuff with maximizing value, I think it could make for a good shorts. So please let me know. All right. Now we're going to take a look at a couple more hands where we kind of created chips in a little more creative ways. These first two are going to be simple. I had actually gotten I had gotten a PM, I had two PMs asking about, situations where we had been, or situations about pounding limpers early in the tournament, and really just what to do post flop. Kind of goes back to some of the continuation bet discussions we did in the second episode. I'm going to show you two here. Definitely different sort of situations, but we'll discuss the sizing and just talk about why we see bet a little bit again. So yeah, we get under the gun limp and under the gun one limper. Under the gun limper had been limping quite a bit, kind of notorious limper. So yeah, I elect to raise it up here to 170. Kind of isolate the limpers, hopefully narrow the field down to maybe one or two, and play the pot in position. The notorious limper, who has also had been quite a limp caller as well, does that, and we've got it heads up. This is where using reads comes into play as well, and also paying attention to what goes on at the table, because without that information, I might have played it a little bit differently. I knew he had been limping. I knew he had been limp calling quite a bit, and I also knew that he had been a bit passive after the flop. If he had missed, he was folding quite a few boards. So I bet 175 here into 415, and use a smaller C bet to take it down. So this kind of encompasses a lot of what we've talked about so far in the early game. Trying to take advantage of some limpers by raising them and playing in position, last to act with control of the hand. C-betting, we talked a lot early in the last episode about which boards we C-bet and why. And, just bottom line, using aggression and position again. Good little hand there, and creating chips there without flopping a hand. Next hand's kind of the same thing. This comes from Six Max. Another situation where we had a notorious limper. He actually only has like 24 blinds. Not the type of person I want to be going after, especially with this type of hand. But I knew he was he's playing so passive post flop. He was essentially limp folding any board, and this was a spot where I was essentially c-betting no matter what came up. In this situation we actually did have top pair, so it was likely going to go all in with him if that comes to be. In this spot, it wouldn't have mattered if he, had 1,000 or 3,000. I was c-betting this board again, just using reads and paying attention to what's going on at the table. I had multiple questions about this type of situation where we had raised over limpers. People were curious about what board to c-bet and why. So, hopefully that helps. Another thing to keep in mind is both these c-bets were in that realm of 40 to 60% of the pot. The last one was a little smaller because I thought I could take it down with any bet size, and if he was going to raise me or if he did wake up with a hand, I'd rather lose the minimum. This one, is a bit bigger. I was probably trying to discourage him, even though I knew he was a tight player. I went a little bit bigger to discourage any action. So, I will bet both with a hand and without one, and, of course, for different reason. Another good thing to consider with both these hands and why we want to pound limpers is position. When we're last to act, we always have the opportunity to take it down when we don't have a hand, and to hopefully dictate the action when we do have a hand. The last two hands I want to show you here today are, starting to get a little bit more creative and kind of finding spots to manufacture our own chips. This hand is actually at the 5100 level, so starting to get a bit shallower. This is starting to get into the mid game, but it's got a lot of the same concepts. This is something we could do when we're even deeper. Here we had was a situation where a Woodman player who had been active, and Princess Amy behind, who was quite the caller, the limper and the caller, liked to get involved but was passive. Woodman was also, I don't remember exactly what I had, but but more importantly, I knew what Princess Amy, the type of player she was, and the fact that I had the squeeze on Woodman. He knows Princess Amy has to act behind. I have that going for me. Gave me a spot where I was able to manufacture some chips, and also I'm using a relatively big stack that I've earned already in the tournament, and using that big stack to try to manufacture some chips. Raise it up here, about 3 times the raise. I figured this was small enough to where if Woodman shoves over me, I can fold, and I definitely thought it was enough to get both players to fold. So here's an example of using position, aggression, and stack size, a big stack size, and reads, and just pressure, all the above on both these opponents to pick up a nice little pop pre-flop and continue to hopefully be in charge of the table. Again, this was a hand that's probably more, this is more early to mid game. We're talking about 30 blind stacks. But, keep in mind if these guys had 6,000 and 6,500, I almost should have just changed the stack sizes on their hands to that for simplicity's sake. But, just, using all those above tools to get some extra chips early in the tournament. All right, the last hand we're going to take a look at here is a big draw. I mean, not a humongous draw, but also just using another player's aggressiveness against them, and another alternative to playing a draw. So this hand kind of goes to producing our own chips, and also an alternate way to play a draw that I like. I tend to do it with bigger draws and against aggressive players who I know I have fold equity versus, but take a look. So big 5-way limp pot. Flop, a big flush draw, and also overcards. We easily could have a jack be good here. Maybe could be up against some like sevens even and have big equity. But I also saw this was a multi-way pot. I also know that I'm more than willing to get it in with SoCane, for a gamble here for a quarter of my stack. So I like to try to make I try to dictate the price here, give myself about 3-1 if I do get called. Also might give me the opportunity to just take it down now, which I'd be more than happy with. Just mixing it up here. Get raised to 350. Based on the fact that there are so many people to act behind, his under the gun limp, I thought he was capable of having a set, of course. I also just thought it was a feeler bet where he didn't know. He kind of wanted to figure out where he was, and this is a player that had been aggressive, had raised a few times, had a the HUD stats had him as an active player pre. He had been limping and calling raises and raising himself. I Also, it just looked kind of weak to me as well, and I thought it was a spot where I could represent a big hand here from the blinds, from the big blind, and shove it in here with big fold equity. So big shove for me early in the tournament. A full 60 blinds. But again, using reads and using the HUD there in that situation, and knowing I still had fold equity. Also, the tournament that it was can make a difference as well. This was a $24 one of the big fields on full tilt. A couple different things I had in mind here was player might not want to bust out early, and or if he's a novice, or that being said, maybe I can get tens to fold if it's a pretty tight player. But also, this is a pretty aggressive player that I had seen so far. Maybe wasn't very experienced and might just get something like ace 8 in. Maybe he's capable of limping that, or king 8 suited from early position early in the tournament. So, all I know is that I have a fold equity, and I'm the one that's putting the pressure on the opponent in this particular hand, and goes a long way. So here's another little hand where we manufactured some chips early without a big hand. All right, guys. Thanks again for coming through for episode 3 of the MTT Principal Series. Finished up with the early game today. Now we're going to be transitioning into the mid game next week. Also, keep in mind always, if there's anything that I didn't touch on enough, or there's something that you want more of, please let me know in the thread or via comment or PM. There's so much to go over and only so much time. So if you feel that there's something that we could address much further, please let me know. So I will see you guys next week with episode 4, and we'll start talking about the middle game. Have a good day.